The last transmission from the SEAL team was 3 words: "Package is compromised." Then silence. In the command center, everyone assumed it meant their target had been moved. But Lieutenant Jessica Blake knew they were wrong. She knew because she had helped plan the real mission, the one that officially didn't exist. At 3:47 a.m. local time on a moonless night in Syria, the Joint Operations Command Center hummed with quiet activity. Banks of monitors displayed satellite feeds, drone footage, and tactical overlays from an operation that officially wasn't happening. Lieutenant Jessica Blake sat at her communications console, monitoring radio traffic from Operation Nightfall, a routine intelligence-gathering mission that should have been completed hours ago. The underground facility buzzed with controlled chaos. Air conditioning units worked overtime against desert heat seeping through reinforced concrete walls. Coffee cups and energy drink cans cluttered every surface, testament to the long night stretching toward an uncertain dawn. Red lights bathed everything in an otherworldly glow, designed to preserve night vision for personnel moving between the command center and the outside world. The facility was a marvel of military engineering, buried 30 feet beneath the Syrian desert, with blast-resistant walls and electromagnetic shielding that prevented electronic signals from escaping. 3 separate power systems ensured continuous operation even under direct attack. Water recycling systems could sustain the facility's 40-person capacity for up to 6 months without resupply. Communications arrays connected the command center to satellites, drone networks, and forward operating bases across the Middle East. Jessica had been chosen as backup communications officer specifically because she was considered reliable but unremarkable. A solid performer who followed orders without asking uncomfortable questions. Her personnel file showed competent but unexceptional ratings across all categories. What mission planners didn't know was that Jessica possessed 2 skills not listed in her official records: photographic memory and fluent Arabic. Her father had been a diplomatic attaché stationed in Damascus for 6 years during her childhood. While he attended embassy functions and briefings, Jessica absorbed the language naturally. Playing with neighborhood children, shopping in local markets with her mother, listening to radio programs and television shows. By age 12, she could speak Syrian dialect Arabic better than many native speakers, understanding not just words, but cultural nuances, regional accents, and subtle differences between formal diplomatic language and street conversation. The memory skills developed later during college psychology courses where she learned mnemonic techniques for studying complex historical timelines and scientific processes. What started as academic study aids became something more powerful when Jessica discovered she could memorize entire documents after a single reading, retain architectural blueprints with perfect accuracy, and recall operational timelines months after initial briefings. She could visualize maps in 3 dimensions, remembering not just roads and buildings, but elevation changes, sight lines, and tactical advantages. But she kept these abilities carefully hidden, understanding instinctively that being underestimated was often more valuable than being recognized in the intelligence world. The primary SEAL team, callsign Wolfpack, had inserted into the target area at 11:30 p.m. local time using stealth helicopters that approached from the Lebanese border to avoid Syrian air defense networks. Their official mission was straightforward: infiltrate a suspected weapons cache in the industrial district of Aleppo, gather intelligence on supply routes and foreign suppliers, photograph or copy any documentation, and extract before dawn. Clean, simple, routine. The kind of operation that happened dozens of times across the theater without generating headlines or paperwork above regional command level. But Jessica knew this operation was anything but routine. She had seen the real intelligence assessments, the ones classified above Colonel Harrison's clearance level. The documents painted a picture far more complex and dangerous than simple weapons trafficking. 3 weeks earlier, she had been summoned to a briefing that officially never happened, conducted in a secure conference room that didn't appear on any facility blueprints. The room was lined with copper mesh to prevent electronic eavesdropping, equipped with white noise generators and signal jammers that made recording devices useless. The man who conducted that briefing never introduced himself or showed identification. Gray-haired, wearing civilian clothes that looked expensive but unremarkable, with quiet authority that suggested decades of experience in places that didn't exist on official maps. His hands showed old scars, the kind that came from field work rather than desk assignments. When he spoke, his voice carried traces of different accents, as if he had spent years blending into various cultures and languages. He showed her satellite photographs that differed significantly from ones in official mission packets. His images revealed recent construction work, sophisticated security installations, and movement patterns indicating something far more significant than a simple weapons storage facility. Underground bunkers with ventilation systems designed for chemical processing. Loading docks configured for specialized transport containers. Personnel in hazmat suits conducting operations that required extreme protective measures. He asked her to memorize specific Arabic phrases related to chemical weapons production and biological agents. Technical terminology used by intelligence networks operating at the highest levels of regional governments. Code words and authentication procedures known only to a handful of people with clearances that exceeded most general officers. If something goes wrong with the primary mission, he told her in a voice that suggested he expected something to go wrong, you may be the only person in that command center who understands what's really at stake. The official mission is compartmentalized for operational security, but the real objective requires someone who can recognize opportunity when it presents itself and act independently when normal command structures prove inadequate or compromised. The phrase had haunted her for 3 weeks, echoing in her mind during routine training exercises and staff briefings. Now, staring at her silent radio while the mission clock showed 4:15 a.m. Syrian time, Jessica realized that moment had arrived with terrifying clarity. Wolfpack should have been at the primary extraction point 15 minutes ago, loaded onto helicopters and heading back to friendly territory. Instead, their GPS beacons indicated they were still inside the target building complex, positioned in the basement levels according to her tactical display. The electronic signatures suggested they were not only alive, but actively moving through the facility, investigating areas that weren't part of their official mission parameters. Colonel Harrison paced behind the communications stations with growing agitation, his polished boots clicking against polished concrete floor. His usually immaculate uniform showed signs of the long night, with sweat stains under the arms despite the facility's aggressive air conditioning. His military bearing was deteriorating into the posture of a commander under increasing pressure from superiors who expected results, but provided incomplete information. "Blake, try raising them again on the emergency frequency," Harrison ordered, his voice carrying an edge of frustration that hadn't been there an hour earlier. "Yes, sir," Jessica keyed her microphone, broadcasting on frequencies that everyone in the command center could monitor, knowing her transmission was being recorded for later analysis, and any deviation from standard protocols would be noted in after-action reports. "Wolfpack, this is Overwatch. Radio check, over." Static filled her headphones, the familiar white noise of empty airwaves punctuated by electronic interference from monitoring equipment packed into the underground facility. It was the sound every communications operator learned to dread during their first month of training, indicating missions going wrong and carefully planned operations falling apart in real time. Wolfpack, Overwatch. Please respond. Over. Silence. Just the steady hiss of radio dead space that could mean equipment failure, enemy electronic jamming, or something much worse. In her peripheral vision, Jessica could see other communications operators glancing at their own equipment, checking connections and signal strength, wondering if the problem was technical or tactical. Colonel Harrison slammed his coffee cup onto the nearest console, splashing lukewarm liquid across situation reports and tactical maps that represented weeks of planning and intelligence gathering. Damn it. Either their communications equipment has suffered catastrophic failure or they're compromised and under enemy control. We need to abort this operation immediately and send in the Quick Reaction Force with full authorization for combat operations. Jessica felt adrenaline surge through her system as the implications became crystal clear. The QRF was a Marine platoon staged at a forward operating base 30 miles away, equipped with armored vehicles, heavy weapons, and close air support. They could be on site in 18 minutes, equipped with everything necessary to fight their way through enemy resistance and extract friendly personnel from hostile contact. But while it was the middle of the night in Syria, back at Pentagon headquarters in Virginia, where it was early evening, senior officials were monitoring the situation through secure channels, unaware that the mission they thought they understood was actually something entirely different. But their arrival would also announce to every intelligence network in the region that American Special Operations Forces were conducting unauthorized missions in Syrian territory, violating diplomatic agreements, and potentially triggering international incidents that could escalate beyond anyone's control. If Jessica's understanding of the real mission parameters was accurate, sending in the QRF would be absolutely catastrophic. A full-scale firefight would destroy whatever intelligence Wolfpack had been sent to recover, alerting chemical weapons traffickers to American awareness of their operations. More importantly, it would signal to every intelligence network in the region that American forces were investigating facilities that were supposed to be completely off-limits, according to carefully negotiated diplomatic agreements. "Sir," she said carefully, choosing her words with precision learned through years of navigating military bureaucracy, "I respectfully recommend we give them another 15 minutes. Standard operating procedure allows for communication blackouts during sensitive phases of intelligence gathering operations, particularly when teams are operating in areas with heavy electronic interference, or when operational security requires radio silence to avoid detection by hostile surveillance networks. Lieutenant, we've been without any contact whatsoever for 45 minutes, Harrison replied, his voice rising slightly as stress overcame military bearing. That's not a standard operational blackout according to any protocol I've studied. That's a crisis situation requiring immediate intervention with maximum available force. According to doctrine, we should have initiated emergency response procedures 20 minutes ago. Harrison was absolutely correct, according to every regulation Jessica had studied during her communications training at Fort Gordon. 45 minutes without communication from a SEAL team operating in a hostile territory indicated equipment failure, enemy contact, mission compromise, or personnel casualties. All scenarios that demanded swift response with overwhelming force to prevent the situation from deteriorating further. But Jessica was studying her tactical display more carefully than anyone else in the command center, noting details that others might miss or dismiss as unimportant. The GPS dots representing individual Wolfpack members weren't randomly distributed inside the target building, as they would be during a firefight, or if the team was trapped or under attack. Instead, They were positioned in a specific geometric pattern that matched architectural blueprints she had memorized from her classified briefing 3 weeks earlier. The team wasn't lost, confused, trapped, or under enemy fire. They were methodically searching the facility, following a predetermined plan that had never been shared with Colonel Harrison or his staff. Wolfpack had found the real target, and they were conducting the real mission while maintaining perfect operational discipline. The weapons cache that appeared in official briefing documents was an elaborate cover story designed to provide plausible justification for American presence in Syrian territory. The actual objective was a hidden underground laboratory facility that intelligence analysts at the highest levels of government suspected was being used to develop chemical weapons for distribution to terrorist organizations throughout the Middle East. At exactly 4:23 a.m. local time, her communications console registered an incoming transmission on a frequency buried deep in classified appendixes of her briefing materials, listed only as Emergency Backup Channel 7 in documents that required special authorization to access. The frequency was part of a communication system that officially didn't exist, using encryption protocols developed by agencies that had no public acknowledgement or congressional oversight. She quickly connected her personal headset and adjusted the channel selector with movements practiced during countless training sessions, hoping that Colonel Harrison and other personnel in the command center wouldn't notice her deviation from standard communication procedures. "Overwatch, this is Wolfpack Actual," came a whispered voice through heavy static and electronic interference that suggested the transmission was being routed through multiple relay stations to prevent triangulation by enemy direction-finding equipment. "We have successfully located the primary objective and gained access to the target facility, but we have encountered a significant problem that requires immediate consultation with higher command authority." Jessica glanced quickly around the command center, confirming she was the only person monitoring this particular frequency, and that her conversation wouldn't be overheard by personnel who weren't cleared for access to the real mission parameters. Colonel Harrison continued his intense conversation with the intelligence officer at the situation map on the far wall. Both men studying satellite photographs and tactical overlays that showed only the sanitized version of the operation. "Wolfpack, this is Overwatch. Send your traffic," she responded, using communication protocols that had been drilled into her during specialized training sessions that didn't appear in her official military records. "The package is not what we expected," came the reply after a pause, during which she could hear muffled voices as team members discussed something in urgent whispers. "Repeat, the package is not what we expected. Intelligence estimates were completely incorrect about the scope and scale of operations at this facility. We need immediate consultation with higher authority before proceeding with recovery operations." In their carefully rehearsed operational code, package referred to the intelligence materials they had been sent to recover from the chemical weapons laboratory. Documents, computer files, manufacturing records, or physical evidence that would confirm the facility's true purpose and identify the networks responsible for chemical weapons trafficking throughout the region. "Wolfpack, understand you need consultation with higher authority," Jessica responded while watching Colonel Harrison from her peripheral vision. "Can you describe the nature of the problem without compromising operational security over this communication channel?" There was a long pause before the team leader responded, and Jessica could hear muffled voices in the background as team members discussed something with obvious urgency and concern. The sound quality suggested they were in an enclosed underground space with concrete or metal surfaces that created slight echoes, consistent with basement levels of an industrial facility designed for chemical processing operations. "Overwatch, the documents and physical evidence we have discovered indicate that chemical weapons production at this facility isn't limited to this single location. There are at least 6 additional production sites spread across 3 countries, and the manufacturing scale exceeds our intelligence estimates by several orders of magnitude. We're talking about industrial-scale production capabilities that could supply chemical weapons to entire military divisions, not just terrorist cells or insurgent groups. But that's not our primary concern at this moment. Jessica felt ice forming in her veins as she processed the strategic implications of this information. 6 additional facilities meant a chemical weapons network that spanned multiple countries and probably involved cooperation from government agencies, military organizations, and intelligence services that were supposed to be allied with the United States. "What is your primary concern, Wolfpack?" she asked, dreading the answer but knowing she needed complete information to make the decisions that were rapidly approaching. "The chemical weapons aren't being manufactured for sale to terrorist organizations, as we originally believed," the team leader replied, in a voice that carried undertones of shock and disbelief. "They're being delivered directly to coalition partner military forces using NATO supply channels and diplomatic immunity procedures. We have recovered shipping manifests with official government seals, authentication codes, and delivery confirmations. The buyers are using legitimate military logistics systems and diplomatic immunity to transport weapons of mass destruction across international borders without inspection or oversight." The world seemed to stop rotating as Jessica processed this information and understood its implications for American foreign policy and international security arrangements. Chemical weapons weren't being trafficked by enemies of the United States or by terrorist organizations operating outside governmental control. They were being distributed by supposed allies who were using official channels, government resources, and diplomatic immunity to orchestrate the largest weapons trafficking operation in modern military history. Now she understood with terrifying clarity why this mission had been compartmentalized at such extreme levels of security classification. Why Colonel Harrison and his experienced staff were operating with deliberately sanitized briefing materials that bore little resemblance to the actual situation. Why she had been specifically chosen for this assignment despite being considered an unremarkable junior officer without any particular qualifications for handling sensitive communications. Someone at the highest levels of American intelligence suspected systematic betrayal within coalition command structures, and they needed irrefutable proof before the weapons trafficking network could cover its tracks, eliminate evidence, or silence the people who had discovered their operations. "Wolfpack, this is Overwatch," Jessica responded, her voice remaining steady despite the magnitude of what she was learning. "I need you to photograph or copy everything you can safely handle and prepare for emergency extraction using alternate procedures. Do not discuss this intelligence on any other communication frequency, and do not transmit any information that could be intercepted by hostile surveillance networks. Copy that, Overwatch. But we have encountered another significant problem that complicates our extraction timeline. We are not alone in this facility." Jessica's pulse spiked as adrenaline flooded her system. "Explain the nature of the problem." "We have detected movement in the adjacent building complex," came the response. "At least 12 personnel carrying military-grade equipment, night vision capabilities, and communication gear. They are advancing through the facility with tactical precision and coordination that indicates professional military or intelligence training. Their movement patterns suggest they know exactly where we are located and are positioning themselves to either capture us or prevent our extraction. The trap was closing around Wolfpack, but more importantly, it was closing around the entire investigation. Someone had leaked specific mission details to hostile forces, either to eliminate the SEAL team before they could report their findings, or to test the loyalty and discretion of everyone involved in the mission planning process. Jessica looked across the command center at Colonel Harrison and his staff, any of whom could be the source of the leak. Or the compromise could originate from much higher levels of command, where people with access to the most sensitive intelligence were making decisions that served interests other than American national security. She made a decision that would either save lives and protect a critical national security investigation, or destroy her career and potentially result in court-martial proceedings for insubordination, violation of communication protocols, and unauthorized assumption of command authority during active military operations. Switching to the encrypted frequency that only she and her mysterious handler knew existed, she transmitted using authentication codes that officially she had never been taught. Control. This is Overwatch Backup. Emergency Authentication Code. Delta 99 Alpha. Requesting immediate guidance for compromised situation involving primary assets and critical intelligence recovery. The response came within seconds, confirming that someone had been monitoring this frequency continuously since the mission began, and was prepared to provide guidance for exactly this type of emergency situation. Overwatch Backup. This is Control. Authentication confirmed. Send your complete traffic without delay. Control, Wolfpack has successfully located the primary objective and confirms absolute worst-case scenario regarding scope and scale of chemical weapons trafficking operations. Evidence indicates the conspiracy extends directly into coalition supply networks and involves abuse of diplomatic immunity procedures for weapons transportation. Team also reports hostile contact with at least 12 personnel who appear to have advanced knowledge of their presence and mission parameters. Request immediate guidance for extraction and intelligence recovery while maintaining operational security and protecting ongoing investigation from compromise. Jessica could hear keyboard sounds in the background as her handler processed this information and consulted with other personnel who were monitoring the situation from locations she would never be authorized to know about. When he responded several seconds later, his voice carried a level of tension and urgency that she had never heard before, suggesting that the implications of Wolfpack's discoveries exceeded even the worst-case scenarios that had been considered during mission planning. Overwatch Backup. Can you confirm with absolute certainty that the mission commander and his staff are completely unaware of current developments and have not been briefed on actual mission objectives or intelligence findings? Jessica glanced across the command center at Colonel Harrison, who was approaching her communications station with an expression of growing concern and suspicion. She had perhaps 20 seconds before he would be close enough to overhear her conversation and demand explanations for her use of unauthorized communication frequencies and violation of established protocols for handling sensitive intelligence during active operations. Affirmative. Control. Mission Commander and all personnel in this facility are operating with compartmentalized briefing materials and have no knowledge of actual objectives, intelligence findings, or current compromise situation. They are preparing to initiate standard quick reaction force response, which would compromise the entire investigation and potentially result in destruction of critical evidence. Copy all information. Overwatch Backup. We are implementing Protocol 7 with immediate effect. You are hereby designated as Mission Commander for all extraction and intelligence recovery operations. You have full authority to take whatever action is necessary to recover Wolfpack and the materials they have gathered. Do not allow any other personnel to compromise this operation through inappropriate response measures or communication with unauthorized command levels. Protocol 7 represented emergency authorization that she had heard whispered about during advanced intelligence training but had never believed actually existed in operational doctrine. It was authorization that allowed a single individual to assume complete command authority during situations involving national security betrayal at the highest levels of government and military command. Colonel Harrison reached her communications station just as she was switching back to standard tactical frequencies, his face showing the strain of commanding an operation that was exceeding all normal parameters without any guidance from higher command levels or any explanation for the delays and complications that continued to multiply without resolution. "Blake, any word from Wolfpack?" he asked, his voice carrying undertones of frustration and growing suspicion that his communications officer might be withholding information that was critical to his ability to command the operation effectively. "Sir, I have just re-established brief contact with the team," Jessica replied, the lie coming naturally despite the magnitude of deception she was now perpetrating against her commanding officer. "They are experiencing some technical difficulties with their communication equipment, but are proceeding with intelligence-gathering operations according to mission parameters. They have requested additional time to complete their assigned tasks before extraction." "Technical difficulties that have lasted for 45 minutes?" Harrison responded, his voice rising slightly as military bearing began to give way to frustration and concern for the welfare of personnel under his command. That level of communication failure is completely unacceptable for a SEAL team operating in hostile territory. "I am immediately calling in the Quick Reaction Force and scrambling all available extraction helicopters. We are going in with maximum force authorization to extract our personnel and secure the operational area." "Sir, I respectfully recommend against that specific course of action," Jessica said, her words carefully chosen to maintain the appearance of proper military courtesy while actually contradicting direct orders from her superior officer. "Wolfpack has specifically requested that no additional assets be deployed until they have completed the intelligence-gathering phase of their mission. They have indicated that external intervention at this time could compromise the sensitive materials they are attempting to recover and potentially result in destruction of critical intelligence that is vital to ongoing national security investigations." Colonel Harrison stared at her with growing suspicion, his years of command experience alerting him to the fact that his subordinate was providing information that didn't match standard operational procedures or communication protocols that governed special operations missions in hostile territory. "Lieutenant, since when does a backup communications officer receive detailed tactical updates and strategic guidance directly from SEAL team leaders during active combat operations? That level of communication is not consistent with standard protocol, and it suggests that you may have access to information that has not been shared with command personnel who are responsible for making tactical and strategic decisions about this operation." Before Jessica could formulate a response that would satisfy Harrison's suspicions without revealing classified information or constituting direct insubordination, her headset crackled with another transmission from Wolfpack that was audible throughout the entire command center through her main console speakers. "Overwatch, this is Wolfpack Actual," came the team leader's voice through static and interference. "We are currently taking contact from multiple positions throughout the facility complex. Request immediate close air support and emergency extraction to alternate landing zone. We have recovered critical intelligence materials that cannot be allowed to fall into hostile hands under any circumstances." The sounds of gunfire were clearly audible through the radio transmission, creating an audio backdrop of automatic weapons fire mixed with the distinctive crack of sniper rifles and the deeper concussive boom of explosive charges being detonated. Colonel Harrison heard everything along with every other person in the command center, and the reality of American personnel under fire in hostile territory immediately triggered his military training and command responsibilities. "Jesus Christ," he said, abandoning military courtesy in favor of immediate action. "Blake, get me the QRF commander on priority frequency and scramble every available asset we have. Helicopters, close air support, Medical evacuation capabilities. I want everything we can deploy moving toward that target area immediately. Maximum force authorization. Move now. But Jessica knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly what someone wanted to happen, and that conventional military response would doom both Wolfpack and the intelligence investigation they were risking their lives to protect. The Quick Reaction Force would arrive at the target area to find an active firefight in progress involving American Special Operations personnel and unidentified hostile forces. She made a choice that violated every principle of military obedience and chain of command that had been drilled into her since basic training, but which she believed was necessary to protect both her teammates and a critical national security investigation that could prevent chemical weapons from being used against innocent civilians throughout the Middle East and potentially around the world. Instead of calling the Quick Reaction Force commander and initiating standard emergency response procedures, she used emergency communication frequencies to coordinate directly with helicopter pilots who were stationed at forward operating bases throughout the region. Instead of reporting Wolfpack's actual position and situation to Colonel Harrison and his staff, she began providing carefully selected information to extraction teams while giving them coordinates for alternate landing zones that she had memorized from her classified briefing materials. She told helicopter crews that she was operating under special authorization from intelligence agencies that required them to follow her guidance rather than standard operational procedures, and she provided authentication codes that she wasn't supposed to know, but which immediately convinced experienced pilots that she was authorized to direct their operations. She coordinated with close air support pilots to provide covering fire for Wolfpack's movement through the facility, while carefully avoiding any mention of the specific intelligence materials they were carrying or the true nature of their mission. She arranged for specialized medical evacuation capabilities and intelligence debrief teams to meet the extraction helicopters at secure facilities where only personnel with appropriate security clearances would have access to Wolfpack or the materials they had recovered. The next 12 minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of deception and tactical precision. Jessica maintained 3 separate radio conversations simultaneously, one with Colonel Harrison and the official command structure that believed they were dealing with a routine extraction gone wrong, another with the helicopter crews and close air support pilots who were following her unauthorized guidance based on authentication codes that shouldn't exist, and a third with Wolfpack themselves as they fought their way through the facility while carrying intelligence materials that could reshape American understanding of chemical weapons trafficking in the Middle East. Through her headset, she could hear the sounds of combat intensifying as Wolfpack moved through the laboratory facility. Automatic weapons fire echoed through underground corridors as the SEAL team encountered the hostile forces that had been positioned to intercept them. Explosions reverberated through concrete walls as breaching charges were used to blast through reinforced doors and security barriers. The team leader's voice remained calm and professional despite the chaos surrounding him, providing tactical updates and extraction coordinates while his teammates engaged in close-quarters combat with an enemy force that had been prepared for exactly this scenario. The sound of helicopter rotors became audible through the radio transmissions as extraction aircraft approached the target area, using flight paths that Jessica had coordinated to avoid Syrian air defense networks while maintaining the element of surprise against the hostile forces that were attempting to prevent Wolfpack's escape. Close air support aircraft established protective patterns around the extraction zone, their pilots ready to provide covering fire if necessary, but under strict orders to avoid escalating the situation into a full-scale international incident. At 4:47 a.m. Syrian time, exactly 24 minutes after the crisis had begun, Jessica heard the words she had been hoping for. Overwatch. This is Wolfpack Actual. We are wheels up with precious cargo secured. Estimate arrival at friendly territory in 43 minutes. Mission accomplished. No casualties. Intelligence packages intact and ready for immediate analysis. Colonel Harrison was still shouting orders at communications operators and intelligence analysts when Jessica quietly removed her headset and walked to his position near the situation map. "Sir," she said, in a voice that carried none of the tension and fear that had dominated the past hour, "Wolfpack has successfully completed their mission and is en route to Extraction Point Charlie with all personnel accounted for and mission objectives achieved. They encountered some technical difficulties with their communications equipment and brief hostile contact. But the situation has been resolved without escalation or compromise of operational security." Harrison stared at her with a mixture of relief, confusion, and growing suspicion that his subordinate had somehow orchestrated events that he didn't fully understand. "Lieutenant," he said slowly, "I want a complete after-action report on my desk within 6 hours, detailing every communication, every decision, and every deviation from standard protocol that occurred during this operation. Something about this entire situation doesn't match any operational scenario I've encountered in 22 years of military service, and I intend to find out exactly what happened here tonight." "Yes, sir," Jessica replied, knowing that the after-action report would be classified at levels that Colonel Harrison would never be authorized to read, and that her role in the night's events would remain hidden within compartmentalized intelligence files that officially didn't exist. 3 hours later, as dawn broke over the Syrian desert and the underground command center began transitioning to day shift operations, Jessica received a brief encrypted message on her personal communication device. "Package delivered safely to appropriate analysis teams. Your actions tonight prevented a catastrophic intelligence failure and potentially saved thousands of lives. Protocol 7. Authorization has been rescinded, and you are hereby returned to normal operational status. This communication will self-delete in 30 seconds. Well done." If this story of courage, deception, and split-second decision-making under extreme pressure resonated with you, let us know in the comments what you think separates people who can act decisively when everything depends on their next move from those who freeze when faced with impossible choices.